Hello everyone and welcome to this video, which is in our Reengineering the Chess Classics series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we are carrying on with the very interesting games of Paul Saladin Leonhardt, a master from the 1900s, well known for his tactical skill and also for his pretty dodgy conversion technique. So we've got a lot of exciting games and a lot of games where you just say, oh no, my goodness, how could you do that? This is actually a game that Leonhardt won, probably shouldn't have done, but still a very exciting game nonetheless. And it was played against Znosko-Borovsky, and it was played in Nuremberg 1906. Let's have a look how it went. So we get a Tarrasch defense, and then Leonhardt played a very aggressive line that was the brainchild of Frank Marshall, or at least Frank Marshall played it a couple of times. Very aggressive line, just mining the center. I mean, Black's best line in actual fact is just to play d takes c4 here and start clearing out stuff. I think that Marshall played d5 in one game. The engines want bishop b5 check, bishop d7, knight e2. But after knight f6, castles, c takes d4, takes bishop e7. They just find their way to an equal position there. You know, it's but I mean, you know, it's quite an interesting line for White to try. I mean, it's not very well known. I think another line that's been tried as well, I think was it one of the Iranian players who played this, bishop c4 as well, just really going for a big sort of Evans Gambit style attack. We're going to get in queen b3 and attack f7, but that's also not supposed to be very good at all. What Znosko-Borovsky did was play knight c6 that I've never seen before. And it's not a great move, but it's not such a bad move either, but going to require quite a bit of accuracy. So White played e takes d5, and Znosko-Borovsky played the very natural knight d4, but actually the engines want the incredible c takes d4. Incredible what you should do to maintain symmetry here. It's a very fraught line, I have to say. So knight b5. Obviously, you can't take on d5 because of knight c7 check. But the engines want bishop b4 check, bishop d2 takes. I mean, this just looks incredibly good for Black to me. But knight ce7 played, d6, and we're attacking the knight and threatening knight c7 check. Knight d5, amazingly enough, bishop c4, knight f6, knight e2, castles, and bishop d7. And somehow the engines managed to bring this to a draw. It's very hard, basically, for White to hold this pawn on d6. Yeah, you know, it's one of those things where you say, well, on a good day it would work for White. On a good day, Black manages to hold things somehow. But obviously very, very fraught for Black, and not necessarily what you could calculate as a human player. Knight takes d4 is much more natural, but now knight e2, and well, basically White's development is pretty nice here, quite nice and fast. Actually, the engines already give 1.34 for White, which is a lot, I have to say, but yeah, I mean, the development's just pretty good. I mean, if you take on e2, there's moves like queen e2. There's also just bishop e2, and you'll throw in a disruptive bishop b5 check. So not super great. I mean, knight f5 was one engine attempt, and then knight g3 we're playing. Yeah, threatening bishop b5 check now, when be very difficult for Black to deal with that check. So you can play knight d4, you can play bishop d6, for example, and put the king on f8. Or you can play knight takes g3, h takes g3. But the engine's having a good time with White. I mean, both torch beating stockfish and stockfish beating torch. So yeah, basically looks like the engines think this is a very serious advantage. Yeah, again, you know, it's one of those things where you say, well, I imagine I've probably seen worse, right? But yeah, the engine's very, very uncomfortable. Znosko-Borovsky sort of, well, he ratcheted up the tension just a little bit more. He went queen b6, trying to maintain this knight on d4. And, that gives black ideas like playing bishop f5 to go knight c2. Queen's also attacking b2, so you're trying to stop the bishop on e3 from moving. Leonhardt played the move knight takes d4. And the engines don't think that that one was the best. They wanted to throw in knight a4 first of all, which is it's just quite tricky for black to hold anything really. I mean, something like queen b4 check, we just go bishop d2. And where's this queen moving? Not very clear. So the best that the engines could come up with was queen d6, but then I'm just going to win this pawn on d4, right? Takes, castles, bishop e7, queen d4, and white's just a pawn up. So knight a4 would have been the very safe way of just a huge advantage there. Simply that the queen's not very well placed on there. And when the queen moves away from b6 as it has to, then just taking and playing bishop b5 sort of highlights the problem in black's position really, which is the king on e8 and the fact that the knight can't come to c6 because there's a pawn on d5 blocking it. But Leonhardt played the romantic way, I think. Take some bishop b5 check. But actually, this is a serious mistake. It's really not very good for white at all, because after king d8, we've just got this rather embarrassing problem that d takes c3 is threatened and the bishop is hanging. So white is actually losing a piece in this position. Now, there are tricks, of course, but they're not actually enough. What Leonhardt played was queen e2. And the idea of this is if takes, we go check. King c7, we can go queen takes f7 check. And if you go bishop e7, I give you a check on f4. That's the nice idea. This king actually has got no squares at all. Has to move back to d8, and then we come back to e8 and give checkmate. So I imagine that's probably what Leonhardt had sort of calculated. But black just plays knight f6 to stop queen e8. And the same threat is sort of still there. Now with queen e2, we have protected the bishop on b5. So knight a4 would be possible. But bishop b4 check. King goes to f1. And then queen d6. It's just really awkward for white here because, we're threatening a6 and b5. And this guy's trapped. When the bishop moves away from b5, we get rook e8 with tempo, which is attacking the square on e1. There's a lot to think about there. So I mean, bishop g5, a6, bishop d3, bishop d7, hitting the knight on a4, a3, rook e8 was games between Stockfish and Torch. And black was just ending up winning a lot of these games. Again, not like 100% obvious somehow, where you say, oh, isn't that easy? But just white's just got a lot of problems tactically. So this move, rook c3, threatening rook d3, and then bishop b5 is one, very unpleasant idea. So just very, very, very difficult for white there potentially. Well, I mean, Leonhardt played what you'd expect. He just kept on going. They didn't back down in those days. In we go with a piece sacrifice. So d takes c3 was played by Znosko-Borovsky, and queen e8 check. That was the idea. Pin on the knight on f6, so we can play queen e8, and it does look quite disruptive there. Queen takes f7 check. But black's actually got a number of good possibilities here. One would simply to play the move king b8. If bishop f4, we've just got bishop d6, so that's not a problem. And after castles, you play queen c7. And the big problem there is that the queen's got no square, so you have to exchange off queens, which is obviously completely disastrous for white. So that would have been a very simple and easy way of doing things. Bishop d7 was played by Znosko-Borovsky, a very decent move as well. Bishop takes d7 and knight takes d7. And what are you going to do here? Well, there's a few possibilities. Castles was one engine idea. The only problem is you take on b2 in this position, and that, of course, stops the rook from coming to c1, so your king's safer here. So we go bishop d6, and yeah, what can you say? This is just very, very good for black, of course, extra piece. So what Leonhardt did was, in principle, pretty practical. Rook c1, just looking to take back on c3 with the rook there. Number of possibilities here, but bishop c5 is what the engines liked. The idea is if you play rook takes c3, I go rook af8. My king can escape, and there's actually quite a lot of massive pressure brewing against the white position there. So yeah, very, very unpleasant. So yeah, bishop c5 would have been really strong, but Znosko-Borovsky played queen takes b2, and the engines now say 0.00. Yeah, it's white's now got sufficient compensation for the piece. Not 100% obvious, but yeah, we need some development here. Now, yeah, Znosko-Borovsky here made another move that was probably not the best either. Bishop c5 the best, just to try and block the c file there. That would have been quite interesting. But bishop d6 was played. And now this move queen takes g7. And white is actually winning, amazingly enough. How is that possible? Well, this move queen takes g7 is actually an unbelievable tactical thing. It's setting up a tactical motif that actually ends up being impossible for black to deal with. It's quite amazing. We're threatening to take on c3, of course, with the rook, which is not particularly pleasant in any case. We're attacking the king on c7. We're also attacking the knight on d7. Going to be very hard to find a good spot for the king. So bishop e5 is a very obvious move here. Just attacking the queen on g7 and defending the pawn on c3, and that actually looks, completely great for black. And in a way, I'm a bit surprised that Znosko-Borovsky didn't play it. Maybe he saw the refutation, but yeah, I mean, all he gets is something much worse in the game, really. So not quite sure why he didn't play it. Maybe he just completely missed the tactic that Leonhardt was setting up there. Because in this position, white's got the stunning bishop f4. So bishop takes f4, and now rook takes c3. And there's the big point about this position is that the queen now is x-raying the queen on b2. So we just need to get this rook out of the way with check against the black king. And the queen's going to be able to take the queen on b2. And there's just no place for black to put the king. There's no way you can avoid that. So the best there is king d6. But then we go rook check, takes, and queen takes b2. And I mean, in principle, black's material is not so bad. I mean, it's going to be knight, bishop, and rook for queen and pawn. But the king is incredibly exposed, and yeah, that seems to be enough. It's one of those typical. This is really. I think it's even known as that, as the Tal material balance. Queen against rook and two pieces. So, in principle, your material down. Normally, queen against rook and piece is the thing that's normal. But with an exposed king and some weaknesses to play against, yeah, sometimes the compensation ends up being absolutely huge. And this is actually what happens in these games between Torch and Stockfish and Torch. So we take rook d1. Black makes a huge attempt to hold this pawn on d5. Obviously the knight's protecting it. a4 is played, and we're just going to chase away the knight on b6 with a5. And yeah, it's actually rather difficult. How do you stop a5? Bishop c3 was tried in the engine games, but then queen a6 and a5 is following. And well, actually, the engines found nothing better than just to give back a piece. But now we've got queen against rook and piece, and still an exposed king, some weak pawns to attack, and some passed pawns on the king side. So yeah, white was just winning an awful lot of those games. So yeah, this move bishop e5 met by the brilliant bishop f4, and end of story. Well, Znosko-Borovsky played rook ag8, but it just fell for exactly the same trick. So rook c3 check, king b8, and now rook c8 check, and after takes, then queen takes b2. And well, white's got queen for rook and piece, and also 2 pawns as well. And well, I've mentioned a few times that Leonhardt's conversion technique wasn't great, but it was more than up to the task of this one, really. So just playing around, hitting stuff, exchanging stuff, keeping it tight at the back, actually, and then just pushing the kingside pawns. And yeah, here he even gave up the rook for the knight, but I mean, with queen and 3 protected passed pawns there, it's pretty clear that we're just going for a win. As always, managed to make it look a tiny little bit risky there, but no problem at all. And that was a great win for Leonhardt. So there we are. Hope you enjoyed that. Some quite nice tactics in there, and yeah, quite an interesting sideline of the Tarrasch there. So might be worth trying in a rapid game or something. Might catch your opponent by surprise. And yeah, just this very, very nice tactic in the notes, just with yeah, this idea of going meeting bishop e5 with bishop f4, teeing up this X-ray attack and then discovering and winning the queen. Very nice idea. So there we are. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you liked it, give a like, subscribe to the channel, and do keep your eyes peeled for more games in this series by Paul Saladin Leonhardt. Thanks for watching.